It sucks. There's sandbags around my house. Everything's flooding. We'll pull together and get through it.
I think it's going to be bad, but not as bad as last time. And we already have dikes and stuff in place, so hopefully, God,
I think they've got everything under control this time.
Provincial crews and armed forces redoubling efforts to recover from last week's storm, but also to prepare for what's to come. 3 intense weather systems on the way and a warning to be ready, be vigilant, and to stay home if you don't need to travel, even as Highway 1 reopens through the Fraser Valley. And on repairing the damage on the Coquihalla, the timeline is long, and yet more and more impacts still being revealed 10 days after the storm and floods hit this province. Good evening and thanks for joining us. All this rain that's been dumping down all day, well, we definitely don't need any more of it, but it's going to keep coming, part of the first of 3 storms. The province is pleading with everyone to prepare. Let's start tonight in Abbotsford, where our Michelle Gassoub is stationed along the newly reopened Highway 1 and Whatcom Road. I know you'll get to that in a minute, Michelle, but first, what is the province asking people to do?
Anita, across BC, there are warnings tonight that the weather could turn dangerous. People are being told to stay vigilant, stay home, don't travel unless you absolutely have to. And if you do have to head out on the road, make sure you have emergency supplies with you. That includes food and water. Now, if you are in a flood zone, be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice to get to safety. As you mentioned there is some good news tonight. Highway 1, which is just beside me, has reopened to the general public, but people are being warned to not expect travel to be as usual. It will be slow going, and you are still asked to only travel Highway 1 if you absolutely have to.
We hope and expect that Highway 1 will be able to remain open, but we will be constantly monitoring its performance, and if necessary, we may have to close the highway again, because safety is always our first priority. But with that caution, this is definitely good news.
Michelle, I mean, it's pretty clear how hard it's raining out there just by looking at you. What is the city of Abbotsford most concerned about tonight?
Well, Anita, this rain that has been coming down most of the day is the #1 concern at this point. They are doing everything they can to prepare while also watching the river levels.
What I am worried about, and I mean worried, not just concerned, I'm worried about, is what will the Nooksack do?
And Washington State has put in a warning about a flood watch on that Nooksack. The city of Abbotsford says it doesn't know if the pump station is going to be able to handle all the water. But in speaking to people in Abbotsford today, they say that they feel much more prepared for this event because of the amount of community support that they've been seeing.
Even today, a man came in today and said, a group came to my home today and said, what can we do to help? And they went down into his crawl space and just gutted out all this wet insulation for 3 hours. You hear stories like that, and as you hear the good works that everybody is doing, it definitely encourages you, it uplifts you.
So certainly people here in Abbotsford do face a daunting few days with the weather, but they say it is that community support that's going to get them through. Anita?
Absolutely, and we've seen that since the beginning of last week. Michelle Gassoub in Abbotsford tonight. Thanks, Michelle. Now, when new details are coming out about the scale of the agricultural loss after the floods, 57 blueberry producers have been impacted with heavy damage to both blueberry and raspberry crops. Many farmers remain underwater, with crops needing to be pulled out and replanted. 4,000 tons of unharvested vegetables were lost in the floods. That's mostly in Fort Langley and in the Sumas Prairie. Crops like cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and leek all underwater. The flower industry has also been hit hard, with all farmers impacted on the prairie. Dairy and cattle farmers also reeling from daily updates about catastrophic loss.
Each time we update those numbers, it turns out to be another traumatic moment for our livestock producers. And to tell you the truth, they don't really want to go there right now. They're still in the emergency and dealing with these events.
The agricultural minister saying because of that, they will be holding back numbers on the losses to the industry for now. And this is the first view of the Rumsar Berry Farm in Abbotsford. And we featured them just a couple of weeks ago. They were growing saffron, a new and exciting crop for the Fraser Valley. Those flowers, as you can see, now underwater.
We are so sad, I can't talk I feel very upset all the time.
Avthar Dillon worked for years to try to grow the valuable spice. It's typically grown in Iran, though he says the wet climate here actually helped the flower's growth. The floodwaters, though, have wiped out the crop. Let's move over now to the interior. David Common is looking at some of the most vulnerable communities. That includes the Shawkan Indian Band near Merritt. More storms could complicate their rebuilding process.
Cars embedded in mud, buses moved by the unyielding water, where rivers bulldozed over the terrain until landscapes became permanently altered.
Wow.
These new maps show the extent of destruction on the Shawkan First Nation. The bridge gone, so too is the power, phones, internet.
One of the biggest worries, too, is the way that the river has widened.
Lenora Starr, one of many who can't go home.
This is the lower part of our reserve, and this shows where all the flooding has been happening.
Some homes can't be used until the spring at least.
We're fearful for more losses, and it sure has changed our whole territory, our whole backyard.
These zucchinis and pumpkins were washed in a couple of kilometers in the big flood more than a week ago, and now with more rain, there are big questions for British Columbia. After dikes failed and roads were washed out, it has a serious reckoning on how it will protect itself in the future.
We're working hard on a new BC flood strategy.
But there have been warnings for years that BC's flood defenses weren't sufficient. Now a disaster has proven that. While the Trans-Canada Highway reopened a bit more today, other roads like the Coquihalla, a critical link between the Lower Mainland and the interior, will take much longer.
We're reasonably optimistic that enough temporary repairs can be completed to allow commercial traffic on the corridor in about 2 months' time.
Of course, the rain is back, hitting saturated ground and already swollen rivers. It's not just that more flooding is possible, but it complicates efforts at cleanup before the weather ices up. David Common, CBC News, Abbotsford, BC.
Okay, we're now getting a better sense of when the crippled Coquihalla Highway may reopen. The province says commercial trucks could be rolling by late January, but it will be some time before anyone else can actually hit the road. Dan Burrett joins us live with this angle. How much repair work has to be done, Dan?
Anita, a stunning amount. The government says the highway was damaged in 20 places, 130 kilometers affected. That includes several bridges, some of which were destroyed. But Transportation Minister Rob Fleming says repair work is already underway. More than 100 pieces of heavy equipment have been brought in. More is en route. Crews are blasting rock at 3 sites along the road. They've cleaned up debris at 2 more and have installed at least 1 temporary bridge. But don't expect to hit the highway for a vacation or just to get around anytime soon. Moving goods is the focus.
In terms of timelines, we're reasonably optimistic that enough temporary repairs can be completed to allow commercial traffic on the corridor in about 2 months' time, by late January. But with that, I do have to caution that the weather will be a factor and a key consideration in determining whether we can reach that target.
And Fleming warns when the highway reopens, 2 sections, each up to 30 kilometers long, will have reduced speeds and only 1 lane in each direction. He does note parts of the highway that are the most challenging in winter were not as badly affected. Fleming says we've never seen anything like this with so many highways so badly damaged all at once. As for how much it will cost to repair the Coquihalla Highway, Fleming says it's not yet clear, but you can bet it will be massive. Anita.
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thanks, Dan. Now, Joe, the rain has been intense today. That's probably the only way to really put it. This is storm number 1. Is the worst over?
This storm is beginning to wind down, Anita. I think we probably have another 5 to 6 hours of steady rain for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. So far, I can see rainfall totals from Abbotsford Airport, and we're up around 30 millimeters. So we may get another 10 to 20 millimeters before this event winds down around 9:10 p.m. tonight. Let me show you what this looks like on the radar, because the heaviest of the rain actually out towards the island, where the west side of Vancouver Island has actually seen over 100 millimeters of rain with this event. You can see, though, general showers still tracking from southwest to northeast. That atmospheric river is still very much going, but it is beginning to sink south. So we do have a few more hours of the showers. Tomorrow morning, we'll see some lingering showers, but I think at the end of this event, we'll be probably closer to the 50 millimeter range, 40 to 50 millimeter range for the Fraser Valley, Abbotsford eastward included. For the North Shore, Howe Sound, probably closer to that 80 millimeter mark, and then getting closer to 200 millimeters for the West Coast. But Anita, just a few more hours. I think many people will look forward to a break day tomorrow. We almost get a full 24 hours between storms. We may even see some sunshine. I'll be back, though, to talk about storm number 2 and storm number 3 a little bit later on.
Got it. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Well, another unexpected result of the floods, glass recycling is temporarily canceled throughout the Lower Mainland. Recycle BC has halted all glass pickup this week, and they're telling everyone to hold on to their non-deposit glass bottles and jars. The facility in Abbotsford that processes glass was damaged in last week's flood, and it could be weeks until things are back to normal.
They have done their initial assessment. It's my understanding that they are starting their operations up slowly so they can test their equipment, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Recycling pickup for foam packaging is also on hold with damage to roads and a lack of trucks. Recycle BC says there just isn't enough room to move the bulky product, but they will continue to collect easier to store paper, cardboard containers, and soft plastics. Well, there's been millions in damage, as we know, but this series of storms has also meant plenty of snow for the peaks of Whistler Blackcomb. And today, the ski hill opened for the winter season. Our John Hernandez reports on how COVID protocols are playing roles, but not everywhere on the hill.
If the cheers and the fresh powder are any indication, the ski season at Whistler Blackcomb is off to a good start.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's coming down pretty heavy, so it's kind of filling itself in as the day goes.
It's opening day at the ski hill, the first time these gondolas have carried ski and snowboarders since an abrupt end to last year's season, which was shut down amid widespread COVID-19 outbreaks.
We put a lot of thought into our COVID-19 measures this year.
But ski hill operators are confident it won't happen again. They've removed a reservation system that was in place last year that limited capacity, and hill-goers don't need a vaccine card to buy a pass.
We just follow what our local health officials tell us, so we are guided by what Vancouver Coastal Health says. We put together our COVID safety plan, they review that, and then they endorse it, and we proceed to run with our operation.
While some residents have petitioned to make vaccines mandatory for riders, many people on the hill don't seem to mind.
It's outdoors. I mean, I'm a physician back home, and I kind of feel like, you know, if it's outdoors, you're pretty spaced out. Skiing's a pretty safe activity.
No one was vaccinated last year, and we were still on the slopes, so you know, we'll be safer than last year.
The crowd's a boon to businesses that do require vaccine cards, but the weather events in the province have left owners with other things to worry about.
But there is definitely some stockouts on certain items.
Restaurant owner Eric Griffith says supply challenges have started to rear their head in the municipality.
We're just keeping an eye on it. Our suppliers have been very good with any updates, any changes, just so we can adapt.
But with some flood-affected routes in the province reopening and deliveries coming in, Griffith expects most restaurants in the community will be able to manage the influx of visitors.
So we're going to go all the way this year.
A hopeful start to a season that might just be inching towards normal. John Hernandez, CBC News, Whistler.
And looking at today's COVID numbers, 424 new infections in BC since yesterday. 3 more people have died. First dose vaccination rates are slow and steady as the province has hit 91% for eligible people 12 and older. Hospitalizations have fallen below 300. 112 patients are in intensive care. A suspect is in custody tonight in Vanderhoof after reportedly shooting at the RCMP detachment this afternoon. Shortly after noon, RCMP issued an emergency alert for the town. This video shows the suspect being taken from a white pickup with heavy police presence. The MP for the region, Todd Doherty, says the man shot into the RCMP detachment, but no one was hurt. It's the first time the emergency alert system has been used in the province. It was issued in a 150-kilometer radius around the town of Vanderhoof. A woman who posed as a nurse while working at a Vancouver hospital has been charged with fraud. 49-year-old Bridget Cléroux worked at BC Women's for a year up until June. The VPD says she fraudulently used the name of a real nurse while providing medical care to patients. Cléroux has a history of impersonating medical professionals. Ottawa police allege she posed as a nurse while working at a medical and dental clinic in that city. They launched an investigation after a tip-off. From 2015 to 2018, Cléroux pleaded guilty to a host of similar crimes in Quebec. Tk'emlúp's Tishkwetmik chief Roseanne Casimir is heading to the Vatican next month. 13 First Nations delegates from across Canada will meet with Pope Francis. A next step of truth and reconciliation calls to action. The Pope agreeing to meet with survivors of Canada's residential school system. First Nations leaders are calling on the Pope to apologize for its role in the government school system. The Pope is expected to visit Canada in 2022, and that'll be the first visit since 2002. Some Vancouver elementary school students are learning more about Canada's pre-colonial history with the help of an enormous map. The Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada is a national exhibition traveling across the country. The map was unfurled this week at Shaughnessy Heights United Church, and we had a chance to speak with organizers and participants. Take a look.
There are no provincial boundaries. There's no colonial waterways named. It's all left, and it's a current map of where Indigenous people are living in what we call Canada today.
I learned that the purple spots on the map is where the Indigenous lives.
The dots are unceded territory. Up there, like kind of where Nunavut is a tidal province.
It's interesting because they don't think of this as Indigenous land. They just think of it as Canada.
Prince Edward Island is called Cradled in the Waves, and there's a legend of Blue Cap.
One of the really interesting things about the map is the renaming and reclaiming of original names. Some name places have been anglicized, and others have actually been preserved.
Toronto is trees in the water. Canada is village.
Okay, what about Quebec City? It's a word that means where the water narrows.
It was really exciting for me as a settler person to learn stuff that I didn't learn in school. And one of the calls to action is to continue that personal learning journey. I think the map also does a great job of displaying active land claims as a huge component.
It's our young people standing up right now, using their voice and defending the land and our waters, because we have less than 0.5% of our land base left. We talk a lot about this, about reconciliation. How are we going to mend the relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples? And so I'm really, really proud of the work that the United Church does.
We have to reconcile our own history, and we have to take on that responsibility of healing and understanding.
We have to be willing to ask questions and to learn together, to move forward together. Like Uncle says, you know, we are all one Nayam Shuat. We're one heart, one mind, moving forward together.
As we head into our second pandemic winter, the new standards for masks and the advice on everything from cloth materials to N95 respirators. That's coming up. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. We've seen some surreal footage over the past week and a half of flood-stricken areas in BC. Tonight, we have more video of Highway 8 near Merritt, washed out and extensively damaged. Have a look. It's not just BC dealing with intense weather systems. Cleanup continues in Atlantic Canada tonight. The major storm that inundated parts of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland with hundreds of millimeters of rain has moved on. In Newfoundland, heavy rains triggered a dramatic rescue. 2 flooded, stranded campers were airlifted to safety in a helicopter. Communities remain cut off because roads, including the Trans-Canada Highway, have collapsed or been washed away. Due to flooding in many areas, it will be several days before aid can arrive by land. Ferry service is expected to resume tomorrow. Now, signs of climate change are hitting our shores, and now Canada's Environment Minister says the federal government is failing in its fight against it. As Rafi Bouchikanian explains, new reports find Ottawa is coming up short at implementation and reaching climate change goals.
But we can't continue to go from failure to failure. We need action and results, not just more targets and plans.
Among the findings by Canada's independent watchdog for the environment, The country's efforts in the last 3 decades haven't gotten us anywhere near our goals for emissions reductions. Part of the problem, different priorities, different goals, and different levels of dependence on fossil fuels for provincial and territorial governments.
The federal government has the resources to be able to fund a transition that is fair for workers and communities to move away from fossil fuels like oil and gas.
Also targeted, an emissions reductions fund started last November, the Commissioner's office found does not actually force the oil and gas sector to reduce their emissions.
They actually said, we're going to increase production. So what happens if you cap a valve here or you stop flaring at this site, but overall you're increasing production? I know it was made during COVID-19. It was a hastily put together program, but that's still no excuse. Luckily, most of the funds are still in the kitty, and they could improve the program before it's too late.
Fresh off a big trip to Glasgow to take part in UN's COP26, Ottawa's defending itself.
Would we have set it up differently if it was an ongoing program? Yes. And that is why I have instructed the department to come up with different options about how we may utilize this to further climate action in a context where the economic crisis has passed.
Well, the political opposition says, told you so.
So why won't the Prime Minister just finally end all fossil fuel subsidies and invest that public money into renewable energy and creating good jobs that help us fight the climate crisis?
The Commissioner says it's not yet impossible for Canada to reach its goal of net zero emissions by 2050. It's just becoming increasingly harder to get there as time runs out. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
As Canadians start spending more time indoors, researchers say people need to pay closer attention to the masks they wear. The latest science shows COVID-19 can linger in the air, so mask quality is very critical. As Vicadopia reports, there are new standards for masks Canadians might not know about.
With every breath, this simulator tests how well a mask filters out air particles.
We can also change the shape of the face here in order to simulate different ethnicity, gender, and so on. There are other kinds of masks that we have.
This engineer and his team are trying to build a better mask, developing new state-of-the-art fabrics. In Europe, some countries have ditched cloth masks in favor of surgical masks, but those too have flaws.
When somebody wears it on their face, we don't know whether they are fitting it appropriately, whether they're leaving some gaps on the sides, and that can affect the filtration performance.
A good mask comes down to the 3 F's: fit, filtration, and function, or breathability.
We know that these small aerosols are playing a bigger role. We should be moving toward, using better mask materials.
Research shows the coronavirus is adept at staying in the air. N95s offer the best protection, and now there are new standards to make them more accessible in Canada.
I think it's a good idea to move toward those the respirator type of mask as much as we can. I think it's a really good idea at this point in time.
As people start returning to work.
This environmental safety expert agrees N95s still do the best job. Federal health officials are now recommending high-risk people wear them, but she says they may not always be necessary for most of us.
I'm saving them because I have tickets to a concert in a few weeks. I'm going to wear it when I go. If I go into a store for a few minutes, it may not be as important, but we have to think about the level of risk.
So if you're not high risk or in a crowded indoor space, what should you wear? Well, don't count out cloth masks just yet. More manufacturers are making them in accordance with new voluntary standards. Look for the certification by ASTM International, which ensures a higher level of protection. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Like masks, since the earliest days of the pandemic, plexiglass has become a common sight in stores, schools, and many workplaces. But those barriers are now being reconsidered in the fight against COVID-19. As Thomas Dagla reports, some health experts suggest they might even be counterproductive.
Could I get your name, please?
When it comes to plexiglass, for many businesses, it turns out the simplest solution may have been the most effective all along.
We've been from the beginning told that we didn't need masks, and then we need a mask. We told that we need to put plexiglass, then we told them plexiglasses don't really work.
Early on in the pandemic, that see-through barrier began popping up everywhere.
in libraries, restaurants, even legislatures. Plexiglass became a hot commodity. Suppliers couldn't keep up. But now, from public health experts, a warning.
There's even some observational evidence suggesting that this actually could make things worse rather than better.
There's consensus that while plexiglass can help stop droplets from spreading between people who are face-to-face, it won't prevent smaller coronavirus particles suspended in the air from moving around the room. Aerosol dynamics expert Jeffrey Siegel has been saying so for many months.
We want good ventilation, and when we erect barriers to airflow, we can sometimes kind of create dead zones or trap the air.
At this Montreal spa, they did the right thing, avoiding big plexiglass walls that trap air, instead installing a barrier for protection at the reception and leaving that mask on behind the plexiglass.
We've decided to keep it, and we might keep it forever.
Experts are reiterating proper ventilation remains crucial for any workplace, including this chicken and waffle shop where they keep a window open and that barrier up just at the cash register.
Bottom line is that we don't know where everyone who has been when they come in to order for takeout. We don't know if they're fully vaccinated. We don't know if they've traveled. And for me personally, I want to protect the staff here.
Nearly 2 years after COVID first hit, the science is still evolving as the virus is still spreading. Thomas Dagle, CBC News, Toronto.
Protesters in India are still in place fighting against farm laws brought on that threaten their livelihoods. This is despite India's Prime Minister unexpectedly caving to their demands last week. As we approach the one-year anniversary of the farmers' movement in India, Salima Shivji is in Delhi telling us why they'll continue to fight.
It's been day after day of this. 364 days of prayers before protest. And the routine continues at the camps entrenched around Delhi. A week after they forced India's prime minister into a rare retreat, a promise to repeal 3 controversial farm laws. There's still joy from these farmers, mixed with defiance and a keen sense of their political weight.
Despite the victory cries, these farmers are so distrustful of the Modi government, they'd rather stay here in these tough conditions until the laws are officially repealed in Parliament.
Kabul Singh has been here since day one of the year-long protest, in chains, a symbol of how he feels as a farmer with only 2 acres of land. It's a big victory, he says, but we'll stay put until we get a written guarantee from the government that the minimum price for our crops won't disappear. That same resolve courses through Hardeep Singh's veins. He's been running a community kitchen at the camp through the stifling heat, the pouring rain, and the cold winter months. Our movement made a big dent in Modi's popularity overseas, Singh says. The longer we stayed, the worse it got for him. Worse still once the farmers started targeting a key upcoming election in Uttar Pradesh, a state Modi's party needs to hang on to.
He's a prime minister that puts politics ahead of absolutely everything. Electoral consideration always trump policy considerations.
And so a leader who never admits to missteps offered a rare apology last week, sort of.
Could call it a half-hearted apology because he apologized for his failure and the failure of his government to make a minority of farmers understand the purity of his intentions.
And even with the laws soon to be gone, Indian officials say they're not abandoning farm reforms.
More communication is required, and that will be done, and ultimately the agriculture sector needs reforms. That is for sure.
It might take convincing. These farmers have learned the power of a highly organized protest with the will to outlast a prime minister. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
Cut off on the Coquihalla. Hope is usually just a 20-minute drive away. How one family is coping, cut off from the rest of BC, and their front row view of the efforts to fix the highway. Next.
This is a story about a mystery, a cult, and a legend that refuses to die. This is the story of the only parachute skyjacker in America who was never caught, D.B. Cooper. Every year at this time, the general store and tavern in Ariel, Washington is taken over by D.B. Cooper enthusiasts. They sing songs about him, relive the legend, and have more than just a few beers in his honor. The Ariel Tavern isn't just a good place for a party, it's near the spot that D.B. Cooper landed and vanished 11 years ago. It's a tale of such mystery and daring that Hollywood immortalized it in a movie several years ago. This is the way they told it.
In 1971, a man called D.B. Cooper got on a plane and got off a little early with $200,000 of the airline's money.
I like living easy. I like being free.
A man who called himself Dan Cooper did use a bomb threat to hijack a Northwestern jet on a flight from Portland to Seattle. Somewhere over southwestern Washington state, he did jump, taking with him $200,000 in cash. All that is fact. The rest of this film by Universal Pictures is pure fiction. D.B. Cooper did not leave the plane on a clear, sunny day. It was a stormy night, and if he survived the minus 60-degree temperatures and the turbulence in his 10,000-foot fall, his landing would have been anything but soft. Here's the reality. The area he chose was mountainous, dense Washington state rainforest. And this is the spot where they first said he landed. It's virtually impossible to climb out of this rugged bush, let alone find anyone in it. After that first original theory, hundreds more cropped up. Some people said he landed in the Columbia River near its mouth. Some people said he landed upstream. Some even said he landed on the other side of this mountain. But the man who knows best about the case says D.B. Cooper remains right where he landed. Ralph Himmelsbach knows all the facts. He tracked D.B. Cooper for 8.5 years.
And the winds were gusting from 25 to 45 knots that night, and his descent would have been perhaps 26 miles an hour. And so you can see he could have been going at least 50 miles an hour and perhaps as high as 70 miles an hour when he hit.
So he'd have been seriously hurt or killed.
I kind of have an idea he probably died there, perhaps of exposure.
We may never know what really happened. He may have died, but after thousands of searches, no sign of a body or a parachute has ever been found. The only trace of D.B. Cooper was $5,800 in weathered bills found 2 years ago along a riverbank.
Returning to our coverage of the flooding in British Columbia now, more rain is soaking the province as many are still recovering from last week's catastrophic dump. This new storm is the first of 3 expected through next week, and the province is urging people to be vigilant and watch weather alerts closely.
We're expecting a series of storms to take place in our province, with the first of these storms happening now. We're redoubling our efforts to not only recover from the incredible destruction from last week's events, but to prepare and respond to the significant weather lining up through the next week.
People are being told to have emergency supplies on hand and to storm-proof residences as best as they can. There's particular concern about how the storms will affect the areas already hit hard. This comes after Highway 1 through the Fraser Valley reopened this afternoon after being closed for more than a week. Washed out highways have left a number of people in BC with no easy route to evacuate or get supplies. Now, there are helicopters that can rescue people who need to get out of their communities or rural homes, but not everybody wants that help. Jeremiah Stebrel, his wife, infant son, and parents are hunkering down in their home in the forest between Merritt and Hope. Thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Jeremiah, you essentially have a front row seat to these incredible repairs that are happening on the Coquihalla. What's been the most fascinating aspect to you?
The most fascinating aspect is how quick the road crews and the pipeline have been able to come together and get all their machinery out there and start repairing these roads. Because we watched everything from start to the current status of the highway right now, and there was a lot of damage, a lot of destruction. Bridges completely wiped out. River was still raging through them. A lot of washouts, mudslides. So it is actually just astounding how quick that they came together and are able to put the plan together and getting that bridge in.
Yeah, and they're hoping to have some of those repairs on the Coquihalla in by January so traffic can get moving again. Now, you are able to be rescued by helicopter, but you've told responders you're choosing to stay put even though you're sort of cut off. Why?
Absolutely. Well, we have property out here just between about 20 minutes outside of Hope, and we're fairly self-sufficient. We produce our own power. We have our own water supply. We have enough supplies to last us a few months, actually, if we were completely cut off. But we're staying here because our off-grid power does require quite a bit of maintenance, and we weren't too affected by the flood. The water did rise to a level we've never seen it before, but still a level that was manageable for us, and we didn't see it as a danger or a threat to us. So we decided to stay, as well as even if we did leave, the community of Hope was battling their own issues. They had thousands of people that were stranded in Hope that got helicoptered there from the highway.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What have you done to essentially make yourself self-sufficient? And is there a chance you could run out of supplies?
Yeah, well, like I said, we produce our own power. We have solar panels and a hydro, like a water wheel that we produce. And we have our own water supply, which is basically endless, so that's good. But the only thing that we could run out of is just food and dry goods. But because we live on the Coquihalla, we've had multiple times in the past years where the highway's been shut down or we've been disconnected from town, right? So we're no stranger to this kind of circumstance. So we're always prepared for that. We always have a very good supply of food, dry goods, all that kind of stuff on hand, just in case something like this does happen.
And just quickly here before we go, your home is okay? No flood damage?
Yeah, absolutely. We're fine. No flood damage. So we're expecting more rain in the coming days, but we're prepared for that.
Jeremiah Stebrel is a resident living along the side of the Coquihalla Highway, damaged 20 minutes outside of Hope. Thanks for joining us. The BC government has promised to review how it governs flood management in this province. Currently, it's up to individual cities to make their own plans, including how to repair and upgrade dikes. But as Justin McElroy reports, that hasn't worked out.
After last week's flooding, Premier John Horgan had a clear message.
These are unprecedented times. We need to start preparing for a future that includes more regular events like this, and we fully intend to do that.
But in fact, the province had been given a report 6 years ago on the condition of dikes in southwestern BC, including the one in Abbotsford that breached. The report said that dike was too low, the geography substandard, causing concern. In total, 71% of the dikes in the region, all the ones in orange or red, could be expected to fail during a significant design event.
We've also known that our dikes are, 1930s, 1940s vintage that are just not good enough to survive during a large seismic event or a large major freshet or storm events.
It was Abbotsford that was hit last week, but there are other municipalities with even more of their land on the floodplain. Delta, Richmond, and Pitt Meadows, which has been rejected for funding on multiple occasions and now faces over $100 million worth of upgrades. Big money in a community of 20,000 people.
We've done the homework. We know the case. We've got it built, and now we just need the dollars.
The government defended its response since that 2015 report came out, saying they've spent more than $100 million on projects in the last 4 years. But the Minister of Public Safety admits a new system is needed.
We recognize that many communities don't have that capacity, which is also why we're currently preparing the BC flood strategy.
But those upgrades will take time and money, while the region anxiously awaits a new weather system coming in the next week. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
A CBC Marketplace investigation into flood insurance reveals 6 to 10% of Canadians cannot get financial protection, and that number could go up as the climate changes. That's next. At 6:44, you're looking at a live shot of the Georgia Viaduct through a screen of raindrops. Coming up, we'll hear from Johanna about the weather that's hitting us now and the storms expected in the days ahead.
Breaking news out of Toronto. Police are reporting that between 8 to 10 people have been struck by a van in the north of the city.
And she asked me if I was friends with a guy named Alec Manassian. She said he only had 10 friends on his Facebook page, and you were one of them. I had no earthly idea that he would do something so drastic.
You understand what first-degree murder is? Yes, it would mean that someone planned for that murder in advance, what's known as in cold blood.
We never got invited to parties. Very few kids wanted to be social with us outside of school. I thought incels was like related to a video game of some kind. I thought it's just Alec being a nerd.
So 4chan is basically it's an old-style bulletin board you might find from the 1980s. There's nothing fancy about it.
These are lonely people. Let's have a look. Let's just jump down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
We are seeing an escalation in violence. We are seeing an increase in membership. This is an endless stream of the same unifying ideology that accepts violence, that accepts violence against women, that encourages and celebrates violence against women.
Involuntary celibates are defined, I think, by this notion that they're in a irredeemable and irreparable situation.
He was just going about his life, but he wasn't talking to anyone about how he felt on the inside. And the shock numbed my body when it occurred to me that I knew this guy for a long time.
Now, in what appears to be a legal first, police have upgraded the charges to include terrorism motivated by misogynist incel ideology.
Alec, do you understand the damage you've done on this to the spirit of this country, to the spirit of people on the autism spectrum? What happened, Alec?
As soon as I started to listen to this blackbird in close-up, I realized two things. First of all, there was a really beautiful clarity to the song. But they also seemed to be singing, I wouldn't call it more loudly, but more vigorously. This bird had a real sort of power to it and sense of energy and urgency, which I just really wasn't used to hearing so clearly in blackbirds.
Chris noticed another change. For the first time, he could hear other male blackbirds in his neighborhood. They're usually drowned out by traffic noise.
And I suddenly had this idea that perhaps the blackbird in our garden was being prompted to sing more vigorously because it realized it had competition.
Back to our top story, this time with a focus on insurance. Up to 1 in 10 Canadians may not qualify for flood insurance. That's a number likely to go up with climate change. Our colleagues at Marketplace are taking a closer look. And as Stephen D'Souza tells us, people are being left without financial protection from the most costly and common kind of natural disaster in this country.
If we had repaired in 2018, we would have ripped it out in 2019 and then again and so on and so forth.
Back in 2015, the Archelesis thought this was their forever home. Instead, 3 floods and more than $100,000 in estimated losses. They say the home was inspected before they bought, and they were never told the area was a high-risk floodplain.
The word flooding never came up.
never came up.
No, never.
No.
Will the issue come up for us? We pose as home buyers, calling agents selling homes in floodplains.
Are there any flooding issues, or is flooding a concern for that area in the house?
For that property, no. It's too far away.
So it's not on a floodplain or anything?
No.
Do you know, is there like flooding issues in the area?
No, it's not close to the water. It's close, but it's behind. There's a laneway, and there's another property behind.
Oh, okay, so is it on like a floodplain or anything?
No.
Experts say the challenge is that there is no Canada-wide requirement to disclose future flood risk.
There's a requirement to disclose known risks. So the question comes, what is known and what's knowable?
He says many don't know they're at risk because Canada lacks accurate floodplain maps. In some areas, the maps available online or at municipal offices can be out of date or incomplete.
Let's pass the trail a bit.
But even knowing you're at risk isn't always enough. Despite not having a major flood, Derek Terakita lost his overland flood insurance. His insurer said his area and climate change means he's now high risk.
It's an insurance company. They're trying to protect their money.
Somewhere between 6 and 10% of Canadians are uninsurable.
Could that number grow?
As the risk from climate change increases, yes, more Canadians could become uninsurable.
The industry wants the federal government to step in to create a national insurance program for those at high risk. The government is studying the idea, but the Insurance Bureau of Canada says any action is likely years away. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's bring in Johanna Wagstaffe again. And Joe, first system sort of come and maybe gone. What's the big concern with the next two?
Anita, the second one to hit this weekend, we're starting to hone in on the details. It does look like there might be more rain and slightly warmer temperatures, which means we could see more melting snow. Meanwhile, getting some more rainfall totals for this existing storm that is on its way out. Let me show you what this looks like on the radar, because we're seeing some heavy bands tonight linger around Abbotsford. The event does look like it'll be sweeping eastward around 9-10 p.m. But you can see there are still some pockets of darker green yellow on the radar around Abbotsford. Those are the rainfall rates of around 8 millimeters an hour. So we've seen roughly 30 millimeters in through Abbotsford. Storm spotters on the ground telling me they've got over 50 millimeters in through East Van. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with around 80 millimeters for parts of Metro Vancouver, and probably close to that 50 millimeter mark for Abbotsford. Okay, let's get through the next system, because we've got that break tomorrow, much needed to sort of assess where river levels are at. Here's a look at the forecast precipitation. So that second system to come in through Saturday into Sunday. I want to pause you Monday morning, because we'll get a bit of a break early next week. We could see another 80 plus millimeters. That's everyone in the gray there for the impacted areas. And then a third atmospheric river. So that really means tapping into some subtropical flow, intense rain in a short amount of time. That's Tuesday into Wednesday for the third one. A lot of uncertainty in exactly where the end of that fire hose will point and exactly the rainfall totals we're expecting. But watch as I take you through this time, and you can really see that break tomorrow. Then the second atmospheric river, the darker yellows and oranges, that's the intense rain through Saturday. We get a bit of a break for the back end of the weekend into Monday, and then watch as I take you through the weekend, the early next week forecast into Wednesday, getting hit once again. Seeing sunny breaks right across the province. I know we could use that break for places like Prince Rupert and the island. Sunshine for almost everyone between these two atmospheric rivers. But the concern tomorrow, for Saturday, with that second river, we haven't melted all of the snow we were hoping to. Snow levels rose to about 1,300 meters today, so we did get some melt. But the BC River Forecast Center upping those high stream advisories, Anita, to flood watches in anticipation of storm number 2 and 3. So we'll be watching that closely over the days to come.
Definitely. I think a lot of people are. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
TransLink revealing its extra special rider today, 9 of them to be exact. The Reindeer-inspired fleet of buses and where you can hope to catch them next.
Explaining a disability often feels like grasping at straws or spoons. There are visible disabilities and there are invisible disabilities. Some you can presume with a quick glance, while others exist below the surface. Many exist in between. I'm lucky in a way that my main disability, cerebral palsy, is pretty obvious if we're face to face. But the effects of my other disabilities, particularly those that are less overt, can be harder to explain. When I'm bedbound because the temperature has shifted 30 degrees in 2 days, it can be really difficult to effectively describe what I'm experiencing. To make things simpler, some disabled people use a cutlery metaphor. It's called the spoon theory. Let me explain. Christine Misrandino came up with the idea in 2003. She has lupus. While at a diner with a friend, she explained how much energy it takes to live with a disability. She used spoons at the table to demonstrate her point. Here's an example with some everyday tasks. Getting out of bed? That might take 1 spoon a day. Taking a shower? 2 spoons. Cooking? 3. Getting through a full workday? 8 spoons. And going out with friends? 3 spoons. Here's the problem. You only have so many spoons every day. And there isn't an expedited delivery service if you need more spoons in an emergency. To complicate matters, I don't start every day with the same number of spoons. Some days it's 30, and I can glide through my day, get everything done, and if I'm lucky, relax. Other days, all I have is 2 spoons, and they're gone. Fast. The number of spoons a task takes can shift day to day as well. Sometimes it takes most of my energy to get ready in the morning. It can take 2 hours, with help, just to bathe and get dressed in the morning. Using spoons to visualize our energy output helps non-disabled people understand what we're going through. It also helps demonstrate that having a lack of energy isn't a moral failing. One of the most insidious ways ableism sneaks into disabled people's lives is by slowly cutting us off from friends and family. It's all too easy to exclude disabled people out of a sense of inconvenience, but when that happens, it can leave us feeling unwanted in general. I know it can be frustrating when your friend bails on your birthday party at the last second, but they may be choosing between going to your birthday party and going to work the next day. Don't cut them out. Don't stop inviting them. Listen to their needs and adapt as needed. The more you can support your spoony friends, the better.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC's annual Food Bank Day is Friday, December 3rd. Connect with your favorite CBC personalities virtually. Space is limited, so sign up today at cbc.ca/foodbankday. And CBC Vancouver's Stephen Quinn will moderate a panel of experts at a free UBC Dialogues discussion about responsible leadership in a post-pandemic world. Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca.
Well, it may be hard to believe, but it's only 1 month until Christmas. And today, to get into the spirit of things, TransLink unveiling its reindeer bus fleet. Each one is named after the reindeer that guide Santa's sleigh. It's part of the 36-year initiative known as Toys for Tots, where staff donate toys and cash for families in need. The routes the reindeer buses will travel on will vary each day. TransLink says it hopes the buses spread some holiday cheer after a difficult year and a half. I'll be looking to catch a ride on one of those for sure. So awesome. Okay, finally, we leave you tonight with a reunion of sorts. After hours of trudging through the mud in her flooded home in Princeton, Charlotte Skowronek finally saw the bright blue opal ring she had desperately tried to find. It was her grandmother's ring and her most prized possession.
My girlfriend called me early in the morning, the day after the flood, and said, if we gear up
and find some rubber boots. You and I are going to be able to go in and find that ring. We met at her house and we geared up in all kinds of rubber and gear. She led the way down a few blocks of like deep mud. I'm talking like up to our hips at some points. And we got through to my house and we went in. And it was just a little overwhelming at first, but we were going to find it. We knew we were going to find it. In between an hour to 2 hours of just trifling through the mud and not even really worrying about anything else, I saw it shining up through the mud. So I just reached down through the mud and I grabbed it. And I just yelled at the top of my lungs, Nikki, I found it. And I was so happy and I was so excited. I just started crying. I think pretty much my entire life, my grandma had it on her finger. So I'm just so thankful I found it. But I thought for sure my grandma was with me.
Talk about finding a needle in a haystack, an outcome we are so happy you had, Charlotte. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. Dan is here at 11 with more local news, and we will see you back here tomorrow at 6.